Hello, Mike.
Good morning. You know, I never know what to expect on the show, but I know it's going to be deep and scholarly. And Wiggy's passion about and knowledge about the Hulk was really a revelation to me.
He's a huge Marvel guy, right, Wiggy?
Yeah, I am. Massive comic book movie nerd guy, not really the comic books themselves.
Well, don't stop there. I mean, the discussion about pick the nit or nitpicky or whatever it was tremendous.
Yeah.
Just tremendous. And Paragon Park, I have a question for you, Greg.
Yes.
Did you ever ride the Roundup?
Is
the
that
Roundup?
Did you? People would get sick on, like you stand on it? Yes, I did.
It was a round. You walk into the ride, and it was just a round room. Yeah. And they spun the room as fast as you possibly can, and they drop the floor.
Right.
So there's no floor beneath you.
Right.
They have one of those at Canby.
Yeah, it was crazy. And most people just came off the ride and just threw up all over the place. It's a wonderful experience.
Yeah. The thing that is burned indelibly in my mind, because I was probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old when my parents took me there. They had a dude who was riding a motorcycle, and they had a giant, like, hole in the ground, and he would ride the motorcycle up the hole sideways.
Yeah.
Like doing round
because they would do
it
in the circle, things sometime in despair.
It was terrifying to watch because you were afraid for the guy.
Right.
There was
a talent they did, and the room Mike's talking about. I think I remember this. It was all carpet. The walls were carpet. Yeah. So you'd stick to the walls, and then they had the outdoor version of it, right,
yes.
Mike, where it was like you were basically chained to this thing. It was like almost like a sex dungeon spinning you.
Always gets there.
Greg, can I ask you a total non sequitur?
It comes around to that.
It always does. A total non sequitur, Mike, and I think you'd appreciate this. You know how we watch movies in the 50s, and everybody's smoking a cigarette, and nobody judges the people like they're dumb for smoking a cigarette in the movie because they didn't know then what we know now? Why do we not excuse what they say? Because it's what everybody said then. You know what I'm saying?
That's a great question.
Like nobody's like, what a moron. He's having a cigarette. What a dink. He's driving without a seatbelt. He doesn't have airbags. Like, it's so backwards. Yeah, anyway, back to hockey.
Credit where credit is due, and I don't know if I want to reveal all the details yet when it comes to road shows, but Mike Milbury working overtime for no compensation.
Wow.
Setting up the very first North Shore road show for this program.
Well, we're hoping to complete that process, and we've got a lot of pieces in place, and hopefully your guy Ken will figure it out. Yeah. He's a little slow on the take sometimes. But
well, Curtis says that a lot. He's not all together with it, as they say.
He's having a rough week.
He was asking me about some accommodations, though. Seems very nice what Mike Milbury has put forth.
Mike Milbury's
we're
very, very
talking
hard.
to the Hotel Beauport, and my sister has a restaurant in Rockport, my place by the sea, and we're in negotiations deep and dirty, and we'll hopefully have good news in the next couple of weeks.
Sounds like a bougie spot.
It's very nice. Beauport. It is very nice. Nice rooms.
All right. Well, speaking of not being fully with it, let's get to the Bruins. The other night, somebody in Twitch wanted me to ask you if you have ever been on a team that gave up 2 hat tricks in a game. To start this.
I don't think I ever have. I don't know that I've ever been part of a team, either as a player, coach, or manager, who gave up double hat trick. It was unusual for sure, but you know, what was disappointing about the whole game, not just this double hat tricks, was, you know, they're clinging to a playoff spot and mediocrity, but the formula should be simple, and they used it against I think it was Ottawa and the Avalanche. It was 2-0 and 3-1 wins, right, going into the Buffalo game. You follow this formula. It's conservative play, except that it's defense first because you don't have enough people to score goals. You got to get great goaltending and shoot the puck whenever you can and hope for dirty goals. And they just went into Buffalo, who's last place in the conference and really miserable, and they didn't show up. They faded back. I know, listen, their top 3 defensemen were out of the lineup, and you have to give them some recognition that that's going to be painful for them in some ways. Even though their top 3 defensemen haven't been playing to their level, it's still a big hole to fill. But there didn't seem to be any passion. There didn't seem to be any physicality. There didn't seem to be any want in that game from the Bruins, and that is a bad sign.
Well, it seems like they might get McAvoy back tonight.
Well, that's a start. I don't know who knows these days. They keep the injuries a secret, but McAvoy is out with whatever ails him, and Lindholm forever has been out with an ailment. I guess Carlo just got sick, but they're going to get back to 100% healthy, and then still, what are they? They're a middle of the pack team that has to follow the formula that I just outlined in order to get successful. And I don't know if they're buying it from Joe Sacco, or they certainly weren't against Buffalo, and they look dispirited, which you can get that way in the middle of the season. And I'll tell you what, they're facing a bunch of games before this break that are going to be very difficult for them. I think it's Winnipeg a couple times against the Rangers, who now have a heartbeat and look like the team that we thought they might be at the beginning of the year. Minnesota, who's a formidable and surprisingly so opponent, and Vegas, who's Bruce Cassidy has them playing near the top of the Western Conference. So those games going into this absurd Four Nations tournament they're going to be very important.
Well,
Who made that up, by the way? The Four Nations tournament. What the hell is that? We don't even have Russians in there, no Czechs in there, or what? I don't know who's missing, but it's just do the Olympics and then forget about the other stuff, please.
That's a big NHLPA thing. I think
is that what that is?
They were driving it.
Yeah, because I've seen the commercials for it. And
I believe we will have the president of the NHLPA, the great Marty Walsh, in here next week.
I think he's going to bite
He's not
you.
that great if he's giving us this crappy tournament. Jesus. Give me a break. Come on.
Mike, to your point about Sacco right now, it was concerning after that loss to hear Brad Marchand saying that they can't afford to not be prepared for games like that. That's a coaching issue, correct? And does that mean that you need to do a full retool or overhaul, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to coaching staff?
It's not just the coach. The coach has to have you prepared mentally, and then has to have you with the game plan. Here's how we're going to approach this. Here's what we have to do. But each guy has to be ready, has to get ready himself, has to, wake up in the morning and start to think about the game, start to think about the opponent, start to know what kind of role he plays in the outcome of this game. So it's incumbent upon Sacco to get people ready, but it's incumbent upon the players themselves to motivate themselves. It's just, it's that simple. And it looks like they're having trouble doing that. And that means to me, you're going to have to make some changes. You're going to have to shake it up. You're going to have to rattle cages. And, I know it's a touchy-feely world now. Isn't it, Wiggy? It's nice and touchy.
Oh, it is.
But sooner or later, you have to rattle the cage and make people take notice and serve consequences.
Mike, when you look at this team,
not lunch.
When you look at this team and kind of like where they are, do they need to maybe go back and take a page out of Claude Julien's book when you're a team that doesn't really carry the puck well into the zone or pass the puck well into the zone, of more of like a dump and chase type of hockey team and try to get goals that way? I don't want to get too into the hockey weeds.
Yeah, you can get in there, Wiggy, because you need to get in there when they're playing like this. I mean, you remember a couple of years ago when they had to set the records and they maneuvered the puck with incredible skill and owned it, and then won most of their games with what looked like brilliant skill, and then they fell flat because they played a team in Florida that was driven by character, not by style. And now the team doesn't have that kind of level of skill, and they have to find the drive that can be successful. And whether it's you quoted Claude Julien's school of thought, and it might as well be Don Cherry in my era. You get the puck to your wingers along the wall. They somehow hammer it out. You get it in deep. You drive after it, and you have body contact whenever you can, and keep it simple. But it seems beyond this team's grasp to get that right now. And that to me means changes have to come.
Mike, there was a report this week from Elliot Friedman in Canada about the Bruins potentially dealing Marchand if they are out of it at the deadline. What do you put the chances of that actually happening?
Doesn't happen very often when you got a lifelong Bruin of his caliber, probably the best left wing in Bruins history. No offense to Johnny Busick, but this is a guy that's done it all. But I've said it before on the show. Why wouldn't you go to a guy like Marchand and say, "Listen, Brad, doesn't look like we're ready to hang another Stanley Cup banner in the rafters here. We got to make some changes, and your contract is up, and you can go someplace name a team that's close to being a Stanley Cup champion, and you can get another chance at the brass ring, and maybe extend your career with a contract at the level that you have now, or just below it, or who knows, maybe even we'll sign you back here in a year, but give it a try and give us a chance to get another asset for you." I don't know why that conversation can't happen.
You think it has to happen with him, though?
I think you have to give him the consideration for his loyalty, his effort, and also, and I have no idea what his trade restrictions are, but I think even if no matter what, you have to have a conversation with him if you decide that's the time to go, and if you decide there's somebody there that wants to give you a sizable asset for what could be a significant pickup at the trading deadline. But right now, everything should be on the table, because and they're right on the bubble of a playoff spot, but I don't know of anybody that thinks they're going to make a deep run.
Mike, so how do you change it? Because they are like a bubble playoff team. If you're the GM in the offseason, you have to be, or you're thinking about how do we change it and get back to where we can actually compete for a cup? What's the thought process in your mind, or what you would be doing going into the offseason to try to get them back to, being a real cup contender?
You know that they haven't had many draft picks over the last few years. They've traded them away in an attempt to win a Stanley Cup. I would be focusing on, at the deadline, trying to move whatever assets I have in hand for draft picks, and then use those draft picks wisely come June, and also take a better swing in free agency. They made a swing in free agency this past offseason with Lindholm and Zadorov, and they whiffed. Lindholm he's playing third line. He's a good face-off guy. That's not what they paid.
Zadorov is on the only line they have, though, so you got to give him some credit for that.
Say that again?
That's really the only line they have, that line.
It's not exactly, Lindholm is not exactly pumping goals into the net I think he's got 8 now. And that's for a guy that's getting paid that kind of money. And Zadorov is a penalty machine. He's got 115 penalty minutes now. Doesn't really scare anybody. Once in a while he growls and, takes a swat at somebody, but it's not, this whole thing is not working right now. And so they have to try to find a way to delete themselves of some assets that will bring draft picks in, get their people in line to know that this is a critical draft season, and then maybe look at free agency where they can take another swing. But it's got to be better than what happened last year with Lindholm and Zadorov.
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound that positive, but maybe they can turn things
No,
around.
it's not. And you know what I don't like?
Tonight.
What I didn't like is when Joe Sacco's pulling the goaltender when they're completely out of it. It's discouraging for a team. I know it's a stamp that says, geez, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. Well, you're down by 3 goals. You think you're going to get three goals, and they wind up making it look even worse than it was. So it's not in a good spot right now, and their schedule is tough. And I'll talk to you next week.
Shime, you didn't ask him about your lead this morning.
Oh, yeah, Mike, the Utah Hockey Club's name, the final list of names came out, and it's down to Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, and the Utah Wasatch. Do you have
I could give a flying fart about that.
Perfect. That's kind of what I expected.
And that's a promo.
That's a good team, though. Utah Flying Farts.
All right, Mike Milbury. We'll talk to you. Talk to you again next week. All right.
Well,
that's classic. I actually like the Utah Hockey Club.
Yeah.
I loved Washington Football Club.
That's a big soccer thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty cool.